Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, Henry John, a wealthy real estate mogul, seems to have it all: a penthouse, a fortune, and a beautiful young companion, Alexa. But his perfect world unravels when he unexpectedly encounters his ex-wife, Gina, at a luxurious restaurant, now thriving with tech mogul Williams Andrews by her side. As Henry's jealousy and pride take over, he sets out for revenge against Williams. However, he soon discovers that Gina and Williams's true victory lies not in power, but in building something meaningful, leaving Henry to face the harsh reality of his own emptiness. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, and keep up with our latest stories. The weight of the past, a struggle for power and redemption, loomed over him. Attention, lovers of drama and second chances. Before we dive into this intense tale, I ask for a small favor. Please subscribe to our channel, hit like, and leave us a comment sharing your thoughts. Your support keeps us creating incredible stories, an unforgettable beginning. Henry John was a man with it all: a 9-figure fortune, a penthouse overlooking the Grand Villa in Madrid, and a beautiful, much younger woman by his side. That night, Henry was celebrating yet another successful acquisition. He had chosen Elenex, an exclusive restaurant that felt more like a vault of treasures. But as he scanned the room, someone from his past appeared. His ex-wife, Gina, the woman he had left behind for a younger model, was sitting at the best table, and the man beside her, none other than Williams Andrews, the tech mogul, the only person in the city whose influence could rival his own. In that instant, Henry's world shifted. The hunter had become the hunted, and the stage for the drama was set. The chauffeur-driven Maybach glided silently to a stop in front of Elfinex's discreet entrance. The doorman, Alberto, a stoic figure who had stood guard here for 2 decades, opened the door with practiced precision. Henry John, a name synonymous with real estate power and old Madrid money, emerged first. His tailored suit, crafted by a Serrano street tailor known only to the elite, draped perfectly over his muscular frame. At 52, Henry exuded a lion-like confidence. His dark hair with silver streaks and piercing blue eyes projected total control. He turned and extended his hand to his companion, Alexa Duran. At 26, she was a former art gallery assistant, now curating art just for Henry's pleasure. Her crimson silk dress clung to her figure, sculpted by personal trainers and a steady diet of green juices and champagne. Her laughter, light and tinkling, was another of her perfected qualities. "Oh, Danny, it's divine," she said, eyes wide in awe as she took in the opulent surroundings of the restaurant. Elfinex felt less like a public dining space and more like a private club for the world's financial and industrial elite. Dark mahogany walls, adorned with Spanish masterpieces, lined the room. The tables were intimate islands, bathed in the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, and the air hummed with the murmurs of power, the clinking of fine silverware, and the scent of expensive perfumes and wines. "Only the best for you, my dear," Henry said, his hand resting possessively on her back. He navigated the room with the confidence of a man who owned it. And in a way he did. He had negotiated the deal that had saved this very building from demolition a decade ago. He nodded at a banking magnate here, offered a tight smile to a shipping tycoon there. His peers, his rivals, all within the gilded cage he had built. Alexa, with her beauty and youth, was the latest jewel in his crown, a symbol of his enduring power. He briefly thought of Gina, his ex-wife, the mother of his adult children, Helena and Javier. Gina had been with him before the billions, before the John Tower reached into the Madrid skyline. She had been his true partner, the calm and intelligent woman who had supported him during his early precarious climb. But as his empire grew, so did his needs. Gina, with her love of gardening and simple joys, began to feel out of place in his world. Their divorce had been drawn out and brutal, a masterpiece of legal battles. He had been generous, of course, in the way a king might be when tossing a coin to a beggar. She had received the sprawling estate in Toledo, a place he no longer wished to visit, and a settlement that would ensure she never had to worry about money. But he had stripped her of her dignity. Alexa's voice brought him back to the present. The sommelier arrived with the Vega Siciliana, presenting the bottle as if it were sacred. The swirling of the deep garnet liquid in the crystal glass, the intoxicating aroma of truffles and ripe plum, reminded him of his perfect world. "To us," Henry said, raising his glass to Alexa. "To us," she echoed, her eyes reflecting the candlelight. She was the perfect companion, beautiful, uncomplicated. She didn't challenge him. She didn't know the man he had been, only the man he had become. He leaned back into the plush velvet, the wine warming him, feeling invincible. He was about to share a story about his latest corporate victory, when his eyes casually scanned the room. It was then he saw her. Gina. At the most coveted table, nestled in a corner with a view of the city lights. But this Gina was not the woman he remembered. Her hair, once mousy brown, was now a cascade of honey-blonde waves, framing her face in a glamorous style. She wore a simple sapphire-colored silk gown that shimmered under the soft light, showing off a more slender and defined figure than he remembered. Her only jewelry, delicate diamond earrings that caught the light when she laughed. And that laugh, it wasn't the polite, contained laugh he was used to. It was a full, uninhibited sound of joy, a laugh that filled the space around her. The shock hit him like a physical blow. The Vega Sicilia in his hand suddenly felt heavy. His world, so meticulously constructed, felt unstable for the first time in years. "What's wrong, Danny?" Alexa asked, noticing his tense expression. "I think I've seen a ghost," he murmured. His eyes locked on Gina. But it wasn't just Gina's transformation that caught his attention. It was the man sitting across from her, Williams Andrews, the CEO of Aura, the tech firm that was revolutionizing artificial intelligence. Andrews was the new breed of power, the Silicon Valley prodigy whose influence had been growing rapidly in the city. He was younger, in his late 40s, with an athletic build that showed discipline, and an intensity that many found intimidating. Henry had once dismissed Andrews as a mere programmer who had gotten lucky, but he could no longer deny the man's rising power. Andrews' company, Aura, was changing the face of technology, and its stock was soaring. He was the future, and Henry, with his old-world real estate empire, felt threatened. And now here was Andrews, captivated by Gina. He listened closely to her, laughing at her jokes, leaning in, touching her hand with a quiet intimacy that sent a surge of jealousy through Henry's chest. Alexa noticed Henry's distant stare. "Is that Gina?" she asked, her voice laced with curiosity. "Yes," Henry replied tightly. "She looks different," Alexa observed, her voice neutral. "Yes," Henry repeated, his voice thick with emotion. He watched as Williams Andrews signaled the waiter, sharing a bottle of wine that wasn't flashy or ostentatious, but sophisticated, an elegant choice, unlike his own showy Vega Sicilia. The scene was a stark contrast to the extravagant display in his booth. His world, which had once felt invincible, now felt shallow and hollow. He wanted to march over there, to remind Gina and Andrews who he was, to reclaim his power. But he was frozen. For the first time, Henry John didn't know what to do. The ghost at the feast wasn't just his ex-wife. It was the ghost of a life he'd thrown away, a woman he had underestimated, and a future that was suddenly terrifyingly uncertain. The hunter who surveyed his domain suddenly realized he was not the only predator in the jungle, and the prey he thought he had left for dead was now dining with a lion, a game of chess. The vast, opulent space of Alphanix suddenly felt claustrophobic, the air dense with unspoken tensions. Henry found himself unable to tear his gaze away from Gina's table. Every laugh she shared with William Solar, every shared glance was a new torment. He dissected their body language with the obsessive concentration of a general studying the enemy's movements. The way Williams leaned in when she spoke, the grace with which Cher filled his water glass, the comfortable silence that fell between them, it all pointed to a level of intimacy that sent a cold dread seeping into Henry's bones. "To Chiaro, are you even listening to me?" Alexa's voice, sharp and with a hint of impatience, finally broke his trance. He turned to her, his expression still clouded. "What?" "I was telling you about the charity gala, the one Cassandra is organizing. I need a new dress, something spectacular." Her words were a meaningless hum, the concerns of a world that had ceased to matter in the last 10 minutes. "Fine, get whatever you want," he said dismissively, his eyes already returning to the room. Alexa's perfectly sculpted eyebrows furrowed. "Danny, what is wrong with you? You've been staring over there all night. It's rude. People are noticing." "I don't care what people think," he snapped, the words coming out harsher than he intended. "You always care what people think," she retorted, a flash of defiance in her eyes. "This is about her, isn't it? Your ex-wife." "It has nothing to do with her," he lied, the falsehood feeling clumsy and transparent even to himself. He took a large gulp of the Vega Sicilia, hoping the expensive wine could somehow wash away the bitter taste of jealousy. It did not. The night, which had started with so much promise, turned into a tense, silent ordeal. Henry picked at his food, a beautifully prepared dew-sole that might as well have been cardboard. While Alexa fell into a sullen silence, her phone held like ash-shield. The atmosphere at their table was glacial, a stark contrast to the warmth and camaraderie emanating from the corner. There, Henry felt an irrational anger building. How dare she be happy? How dare she move on, not just to a new life, but to a better one? It was a betrayal of the narrative he had written for her, for them. She was supposed to be the tragic figure, the one left behind. Her happiness felt like a personal insult, a judgment on his choices, as if sensing his agitation. Mark the Matra materialized at his side. "Is everything to your satisfaction, Mr. John?" he asked, his voice a low, discreet murmur. "Everything is fine, Mark," Henry said through gritted teeth. But then a thought, cold and calculating, slipped into his mind. Mark. Who is that gentleman with Mrs. John? He used her old name deliberately, a small assertion of his former right to her. Mark, the soul of discretion, didn't blink. "That is Mr. William Solaravora." "I know who he is," Henry said with impatience. "Are they regular patrons?" "Mr. Solar dines with us occasionally. The lady, the madam, has been with him several times in the past few months." Several months. The words hit Henry with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't a first date. It was a relationship. Aerial established relationship that had been unfolding right under his nose in the heart of his own city. The carefully constructed walls of his self-confidence began to crumble. The inevitable moment arrived. Gina and Williams Andrews had finished their meal. As Andrews paid the bill, Gina rose from her seat, her movements fluid and graceful. She smoothed down her sapphire dress and cast her gaze for the first time that night across the room. And then her eyes met Henry's. For an instant, the world stopped. The ambient noise of the restaurant faded into a dull roar. He saw a flash of surprise in her eyes, a brief moment of unguarded recognition, but it was quickly replaced by something else, a cool, unreadable composure. There was no hurt, no anger, no lingering affection. There was nothing. It was the quiet, polite neutrality one might offer a distant acquaintance. And that, more than any outburst or accusation, was what truly shattered him. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod, a cold gesture of acknowledgement before turning her attention back to Williams, who was now standing at her side. He placed a light hand on her back, a protective, possessive gesture, and began to guide her toward the exit. Their path would take them directly past Henry's table. The air crackled with anticipation. Henry's heart hammered in his ribs. He felt a primal need to say something, to do something, to break her composure and force a reaction. Alexa, sensing the impending collision, sat up straight, her eyes wide. A spectator in a drama-shay was only beginning to comprehend as they neared the booth. William Solar stopped, turned his head, and looked directly at Henry, his expression calm and serene. "John," he said, his voice even, and devoid of any discernible emotion. It was a simple acknowledgement, but it carried the weight of a gauntlet thrown. Henry, taken aback by the direct address, couldn't manage a curt nod in return. "Gina." Gina's gaze followed Williams's. She looked at Henry. Then her eyes flickered for a fraction of a second toward Alexa, taking in the crimson dress, the youthful face, the whole tableau of his new life. A ghost of a smile, enigmatic and faintly amused, touched her lips. "Henry," she said, her voice as soft and cold as polished marble. It was the first time she had spoken his name in over 2 years. The sound of his name on her lips was both strange and painfully familiar. Then she turned and walked away, her head held high, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and shattered assumptions in her wake. Williams Andrews gave Henry one last long look, a look that was both a challenge and a dismissal before following her out. Henry sat motionless in his booth, the remains of his due soul congealing on the plate in front of him. The king was still in his castle, but his walls had been breached. He looked at Alexa, but only saw a pale imitation of the woman who had just walked out of his life for the second time. "Well," Alexa said, breaking the heavy silence, her voice dripping with a newfound sarcasm. "That was educational," Henry did not reply. He was staring at the door through which Gina and Williams had disappeared, a cold, terrifying thought solidifying in his mind. He had not just lost a wife. He had lost a war he didn't even know he was fighting. And in Henry John's world, losing was not an option. The fallen king's revenge, the shock, was now hardening into something far more dangerous. A burning, obsessive need for retribution. The ride back to Henry's penthouse was a study in glacial silence. The opulent interior of the Maybach, usually a cocoon of comfort and luxury, felt like a tomb. Alexa stared out the window at the bright, indifferent city lights, while Henry replayed the scene in their restaurant over and over in his mind, each time adding a new layer of humiliation and rage. Gina's cold composure, Andrews's confident demeanor, the effortless intimacy between them. It was all a personal affront, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to mock him. He stormed into the penthouse, took off his jacket, and threw it onto a ridiculously expensive chaise longue. The apartment, a sprawling duplex with panoramic views of Rero Park, was his sanctuary, a monument to his success. But tonight, it felt empty. The vast vacant spaces echoed his own inner emptiness. "I need a drink," he announced to no one in particular. Heading to the marble-topped bar, he ignored the aged Connachts and single malt whizzies. Instead, he grabbed a bottle of vodka. He poured a generous measure into a crystal glass, foregoing the ceremony of ice or a mixer, and drank it in one fiery gulp. Alexa watched him from the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest. The sullen, petulant woman from the restaurant had been replaced by someone with a harder, more calculating edge. "So, are you going to tell me what that was all about?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Or are you just going to drink yourself into a stupor?" "It was nothing," Henry growled, pouring himself another drink. "A chance encounter. It means nothing." "It didn't look like nothing, Danny," she retorted, stepping further into the room. "The way you looked at her, I've never seen you look at me like that. You look at me as if I'm a prize. You looked at her as if she was the one that got away." "Don't be ridiculous," he sneered, but the words lacked conviction. Alexa's observation was too close to the truth. "I don't need to know my life, my marriage. She has William Solar. You left her and she's with him. That's what's really eating at you, isn't it? It's not about her. It's about your ego. It's about him." Her words were a slap, a brutal and unwanted truth. He turned with eyes ablaze. "You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know anything about my life, my marriage. I know what I see." Alexa's voice was now a furious cry. "I see a man who thought he had it all, who thought he could discard a woman like an old suit, and now he's having a complete meltdown because she dared to find happiness with someone else, someone better." The word better was a poisoned dart. "Get out," Henry said, his voice low and dangerous. "What?" "I said, get out!" he roared, pointing a trembling finger toward the door. "Go back to your little apartment, which I pay for with the clothes I bought you, and leave me alone." Tears of rage and humiliation sprang into Alexa's eyes. She stared at him for a long moment, her beautiful face a mask of fury. "You know what, Henry? For the first time, I actually feel sorry for her. She escaped. I'm just living in the prison she got out of." With that, she turned. She grabbed her purse from the counter and stormed out, slamming the door behind her with a resonant bang that seemed to shake the entire penthouse. Alone in the cavernous room, Henry sank onto a leather sofa. The anger drained from him, leaving behind a cold, heavy dread. Alexa was right. His rage was fueled by a toxic cocktail of wounded pride, jealousy, and most terrifyingly, a nagging sense of his own obsolescence. Andew's was the future. He was the past. Gina's alliance with him felt like a definitive statement on his own relevance. His mind, conditioned for decades to treat every problem as a business challenge, immediately began to strategize. He needed information. He needed leverage. He needed to understand the dynamics of this new reality so he could find a way to disrupt it. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. It belonged to a man named Hector Vargas, a private investigator who operated in the gray areas of the law. A specialist in digging up the kind of dirt that could ruin reputations and bring down empires. "Vargas." A husky voice answered on the second ring. "It's John." There was a slight pause. "Henry, it's been a long time. I trust you're not calling Torreminis. I need information, Hector, on two people. My ex-wife, Gina John, though she may be using her maiden name, Ramos, and a man named William Andew's." "Andew's of Aura," Vargas sounded intrigued. "Flying high these days. What do you want to know?" "Everything," Henry said, his voice a low growl. "Their relationship, how they met, how long they've been seeing each other, his financials, his business, any vulnerabilities, and her. I want to know what she's been doing for the last 2 years. Every detail. I want to know who her friends are, where she goes, what she does. I want to know her." He wanted to understand the woman she had become, the woman who had captivated a man like Solar. He needed to find the weak spot in her armor, the weakness he could exploit. "That's a deep dive, Henry. It'll be expensive." "I don't care about the cost," Henry said, his gaze fixed on the city skyline. "I want it done, and I want it done in silence. You know me, Henry. Silence is my middle name." After hanging up, Henry felt a sliver of his old control return. He was acting, taking the initiative. But as he looked out at the sprawling city, a new unsettling thought began to form. Why was Andew's interested in Gina? A man like him could have any woman he wanted, models, actresses, socialites. Why choose a divorced woman in her late 40s, a woman Henry himself had deemed unworthy? Was it possible there was more to this than a simple romance? Was Andew's using her somehow? The thought was both repulsive and strangely comforting. If Gina was a pawn in a bigger game, it would make sense. It would restore the order of his world. But then another, more insidious thought crept in. What if Solar wasn't using her at all? What if he saw in Gina the same things Henry had overlooked or scorned? Her intelligence, her quiet strength, her integrity. What if in his blind arrogance he had thrown away a diamond, only to see it picked up and polished by a more discerning eye? The thread of his neatly ordered life had been severed, and as Henry sat alone in his gilded cage, he could feel the entire tapestry beginning to unravel. The investigation into Gina and Solar was no longer just about gathering information. It was about finding a way to knit his world back together, even if it meant tearing theirs apart. The final gambit. A week later, an unmarked manila envelope arrived at Henry's private office. Inside was a thin USB drive and a single sheet of paper with a typed message. First delivery, HV. Henry dismissed his secretary for the day, locked his office door, and slid the drive into his laptop. The screen filled with files, surveillance photos, financial reports, and a detailed summary from Hector Vargas. He clicked on the summary, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. The report began with Gina. After the divorce, she had not crumbled as he expected. Instead, she had undergone a quiet, determined metamorphosis. She had sold the Toledo estate, a move that surprised Henry. He had seen it as her gilded cage, her consolation prize, but she had clearly seen it as a tether to a past she wanted to sever. With a portion of the settlement money, she had established a nonprofit foundation dedicated to providing scholarships and mentorship for underprivileged young women in STEM fields. The report detailed how Gina had personally overseen every aspect of the foundation's creation, from writing the bylaws to interviewing the first round of scholarship recipients. She had leveraged her old contacts from her pre-marriage career in university administration and had quickly built a small but respected organization. The photos Vargas had included were not of a lonely, heartbroken woman. They showed Gina in boardrooms at charity events speaking at a university podium. She looked poised, engaged, and full of purpose. The sapphire dress at Elenex was not an anomaly. It was her new uniform. Then came the part he was truly waiting for, her connection to William Solar. They had not met at a gala or a society party. They had met at a technology conference, where Gina had been a guest speaker presenting on the importance of diversity in tech innovation. Andrews had been in the audience. According to Vargas's sources, he had been so immersed by her speech and the work of her foundation that he had approached her afterward. Their first date had been a tour of her foundation's office, followed by a quiet dinner. Their relationship, Vargas wrote, had developed slowly and organically over the past 8 months. It was built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared interests. Andrews was a major donor to her foundation, but his involvement was more than just financial. He served as an informal advisor, connecting her with influential figures in the tech world and providing mentorship to her scholarship students. Henry felt a sour taste in his mouth. This was not a sordid affair or a cynical power play. It was a partnership. Andrews wasn't just attracted to Gina's newfound glamour. He was attracted to her mind, her passion, her purpose, the very qualities Henry had come to find so domestic and unexciting. He turned his attention to Solar's files. The financials were, as expected, astronomical. Aura was a juggernaut. Its stock price seemed to defy gravity. But Vargas had dug past the public records and into the murkier waters of Solar's business, and there he had found something interesting. Aura was in the final stages of a high-stakes secret negotiation to acquire a smaller but incredibly innovative robotics company called Kinetic Dynamics. The deal was worth billions and would solidify Aura's dominance in the AI and robotics space for the next decade. Kinetic Dynamics held key patents that would be revolutionary if integrated with Aura's AI platform. The acquisition was Solar's passion project, the cornerstone of his long-term strategy. Henry leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. He knew Kinetic Dynamics. In fact, a subsidiary of John Properties held a significant, though non-controlling stake in the company. It was a legacy investment he hadn't paid much attention to in recent years. But now it was a weapon. A cold, brilliant idea began to form in his mind. As a major shareholder, he could potentially derail the acquisition. He could raise objections, demand a higher price, rally other shareholders, and bog the deal down in a quagmire of legal and financial complications. He could make Solar's life a living hell. He could bleed him dry, distract him, and maybe even kill the deal altogether. It would be a devastating blow to Aura and to Solar personally. It was the perfect revenge. It was not a direct attack on Gina, which would be messy and could backfire, making him look petty. This was business. It was a move on the corporate battlefield, a world he understood and dominated. He would hit Solar where he was most vulnerable, his ambition, his legacy. And Gina, as Solar's partner, would be caught in the crossfire. Her newfound happiness would be inextricably linked to the fortunes of a man he was about to bring to his knees. The plan was audacious, ruthless, and deeply satisfying. It restored his sense of control, his belief in his own power. He was no longer the passive, humiliate observer in the restaurant. He was Henry John, the puppet master, and he was about to start pulling the strings. He picked up the phone and dialed his head of corporate strategy. "David," he said, his voice hard as steel, "I want you to pull everything we have on a company called Kinetic Dynamics. I want a full breakdown of our shareholder rights and a list of all other major investors. We're going to war." The decision settled a sense of calm over him. But as he looked at Gina's photo on his screen, smiling, confident, standing at a podium, a flicker of doubt pricked his conscience. The woman in the photo was a stranger to him, but she was also the mother of his children. The woman who had once shared his dreams. Was he truly prepared to destroy her newfound happiness just to soothe his wounded ego? He dismissed the thought. This was no longer about feelings. It was about power. In his world there were winners and losers, and Henry John never lost. He closed the laptop, Gina and Solar's faces temporarily hidden from view. The game had begun, and he was sure he had just found his checkmate. A checkmate of a different kind. The boardroom of John Properties was Henry's sanctuary of power. His modern-day throne room. It was a space meticulously designed to intimidate. The 20-foot-long table, carved from a single piece of rare Brazilian mahogany, gleamed under a constellation of custom-designed recessed lights. The glass wall behind his chair didn't just offer a view. It presented the city Ashes domain, a sprawling map of his conquests. Before William Solar arrived, Henry paced the room like a caged panther, adjusting the position of a water carf by a millimeter, ensuring the leather folder in front of his chair was perfectly aligned. He wasn't just preparing for a meeting. He was setting a stage for an execution. His legal team had assured him that his position was airtight. The motion to block the sale of Kinetic Dynamics to Aura was a masterpiece of corporate legal jargon filled with plausible deniability and seemingly sound financial reasoning. It was a declaration of war disguised as prudent business. In his mind, the scenario was clear. So would arrive angry and blustering. Henry would remain calm, imperious. A stone wall of corporate procedure. He would watch the tech prodigy, the man who had stolen his past, slowly realize that he was out of his depth, tangled in a game whose rules were written by old money and ruthless ambition. Henry craved that moment of dawning fear in Solar's eyes. It was a hunger that had gnawed at him for a week when his private secretary announced Solar's arrival. Henry took a deep breath. He sat down in his high-backed leather chair and interlaced his fingers, the very picture of untouchable authority. William Andrews entered the room alone. There was no entourage of lawyers or assistants. He wore a simple, exquisitely tailored dark gray suit, a stark contrast to Henry's power stripes. He carried a slim leather portfolio and moved with an unhurried grace. There was a silent statement of self-confidence. His presence didn't alter the power dynamic of the room. He simply ignored it. He was not a supplicant entering a king's court. He was an equal. He walked to the far end of the long table and paused for a moment, his gaze sweeping over the panoramic view before turning to Henry. An impressive view. "Henry," Solar began, his voice quiet and resonant, easily filling the cavernous space. The use of his first name was a subtle but effective check to the room's intended intimidation. "It's easy to feel like a god from up here, but you have to be careful. Heights can make you forget what happens on the ground." Henry bristled at the veiled condescension. "I'm a busy man, Solar. I appreciate the architectural commentary, but my time is valuable. I assume you're here about Kinetic Dynamics." "That's right," Solar replied, taking a seat. He didn't wait to be invited. "Your motion to block the acquisition is creative. A lot of impressive legal jargon to say you want to cause trouble. I have a fiduciary duty to the shareholders of my company." Henry recited the words, feeling hollow even to himself. "Your offer for Kinetic, while superficially attractive, undervalues the company's long-term patent portfolio. I believe a more competitive bidding process would yield a greater return for everyone. It's just business." So met his gaze, a faint, almost imperceptible smile on his lips. "Let's not insult each other's intelligence, Henry. This isn't about business, and we both know it. You've held that non-controlling stake in Kinetic for 12 years, and you haven't attended a single shareholder meeting. Your own analysts recommended divesting 2 years ago. Your sudden, passionate concern for its patent portfolio appeared exactly 48 hours after you saw me having dinner with Gina. The frankness of the attack was unnerving. Henry had expected a dance, a series of feints and parries. Andrews had simply walked to the center of the ring and thrown a punch. "This has nothing to do with my ex-wife," Henry snapped, his voice a low growl. "And I'd advise you to leave her out of this conversation." "I can't," Andrews said, his voice losing its lightness and taking on the hardness of forged steel. "Because she is the reason for this entire conversation. You saw her happy. You saw her empowered. And you couldn't stand it. You couldn't attack her directly. That would look petty even for you. So you came after me using your shares in Kinetic as a club. You're willing to sabotage a billion-dollar deal that is crucial to the future of technology. A deal that ironically would significantly increase the value of your own investment. All to soothe your pathetic wounded ego. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, piercing Henry's carefully constructed armor of self-importance. You're arrogant and presumptuous. Henry spat, his face flushed. You walk into my city, my world, and you think you understand me. You think you understand the woman I was married to for 25 years. No, Solar conceded, leaning forward. I don't pretend to understand the man you are. But I have spent the last 8 months getting to know the woman you threw away. I know she's brilliant. I know she's resilient. And I know she's a better strategist than you are. You underestimated her then, and you're making the grave mistake of underestimating her now. You see, you think this is your game, your table. He gestured to the mahogany expanse between them. You're wrong. You've been playing her game since the moment you walked into that restaurant. He reached into his portfolio, pulled out the slim leather folder, and slid it with deliberate slowness across the vast polished surface. It stopped directly in front of Henry. Before you detonate this grenade you've built, I thought you should see the blast radius. I thought you should see the board. With trembling hands, Henry opened the portfolio. The title page read, The Ramos Innovation Center, a proposal for the development of the Westlands. His blood ran cold. The Westlands, the sprawling 16-acre parcel of post-industrial land that was supposed to be his magnum opus, his flagship project. He had spent millions on lobbyists, architects, and backroom deals trying to secure it. The bidding process had been secretive, brutal, and he had been certain that his final offer submitted last month was unbeatable. He flipped through their pages, his horror mounting with each one. He saw architectural renderings of a stunning state-of-the-art campus, a harmonious blend of glass, steel, and green spaces. He saw a detailed business proposal that was nothing short of visionary. This wasn't just another soulless glass tower of luxury condominiums. It was a symbiotic ecosystem, a partnership between Gina's nonprofit foundation and a commercial tech incubator. The plan promised thousands of high-paying jobs, educational partnerships with the city's universities, and public community spaces. It was a developer's dream and a politician's fantasy. How? He finally whispered, looking at Solar, his mind reeling. The bidding was sealed. My offer was immense. Your offer was about money, Solar explained, his voice patient like a teacher explaining a complex problem to a slow student. Gina's offer was about value. She knew you wanted that land. She's been listening to you talk about it for a decade. She knew your plan was to build another monument to yourself, another sterile enclave for the global elite. So she spent a year working in silence on a better idea. He detailed the strategy with surgical precision. Gina had leveraged her foundation's stellar reputation and her own academic contacts. She had met personally with the community boards, listening to their concerns. She had courted the city council members Henry had tried to intimidate. She presented them not with a pile of cash, but with a vision for the city's future, a future of innovation, not just empty real estate. The mayor had called her proposal the most exciting urban development project of the 21st century. While you were focused on your hostile takeovers and your trophy girlfriends, Gina was changing the city. Solar continued, twisting the knife. The development rights for the Westlands were awarded to the Ramos Foundation 2 weeks ago. The announcement is pending. Henry felt the air leave his lungs. He had been so engrossed in his petty act of revenge against Andus that he had missed the main event. He had been setting a trap for a rabbit, oblivious to the fact that a pack of wolves was surrounding him. And here's the master stroke, Henry, Solar said, leaning in for the final fatal blow. What do you think is the anchor tenant for the commercial wing of the Ramos Center? The flagship company that will draw in other innovators and validate the entire project. He paused, letting the silence stretch. It's kinetic dynamics. Its main robotics lab will occupy the 3 central buildings. The entire financial model of the Ramos Center, Gina's entire vision, is predicated on my acquisition of Kinetic being successful. The deal is symbiotic. The 2 projects are inextricably linked. The trap was sprung. The genius of it was breathtaking in its cruelty. If he continued his attack on Solar's acquisition, he wouldn't just be a bitter corporate raider. He would be the man who personally, publicly, and maliciously destroyed his ex-wife's life's work, the mother of his children. He would be torpedoing a project beloved by the city, confirming every caricature of him as a greedy, destructive dinosaur. He wouldn't just lose the deal, he would lose everything. His public reputation, what little respect his children had for him, his entire legacy. He was in checkmate, total and complete. He looked at the documents, the elegant building that bore the name Ramos, a name she had reclaimed, a name now synonymous with vision and progress. What do you want? Henry asked, his voice a rasping sound he barely recognized as his own. The bravado, the anger, the arrogance, it had all evaporated, leaving only the cold, raw reality of his defeat. "It's simple," Solar said, his voice now devoid of malice, retaining only the calm of absolute victory. "You will call your lawyers, and you will withdraw the motion against the kinetic acquisition unconditionally. Then you'll leave. The Westlands are no longer your problem. The Ramos Center is no longer your problem. And Gina is no longer your problem." Henry remained motionless for what felt like an eternity. The city lights began to gleam in the twilight outside his window. No longer symbols of his kingdom, but small mocking eyes. He thought of Gina, not the mousy woman he remembered, but the force of nature who had outmaneuvered him at every turn. He had tried to put her in a box, and she had responded by designing the entire city's skyline. Finally, with a slow, crushing exhale, he nodded with a single, almost imperceptible movement. "Fine." The word was the epitaph of his reign. Solar stood up, his objective accomplished. He gathered his portfolio, his movements crisp and efficient. He walked to the door but paused with his hand on the knob, turning to face the broken man at the head of the table. "You know, Henry, in all the time I've known Gina, I've never heard her speak ill of you," he said. His voice softened with something that might have been pity. "She talks about your early years, about the ambition she once admired. She says you gave her 2 wonderful children, Helena and Javier, and that they are the best part of both of you. They, incidentally, are on the Foundation's junior board. They are immensely proud of what their mother is building." He let that last detail sink in. "She found her own purpose, Henry. I sincerely suggest you try to find one for yourself." The door closed with a click, the sound echoing in the cavernous, silent boardroom. Henry remained in his chair, a solitary figure dwarfed by the symbols of his own empty empire. The city gleamed indifferently. He had sought to orchestrate a drama of power and revenge. But instead, he had been cast as the tragic, obsolete fool in a story of rebirth and triumph. He was Henry John, the man who had it all. And he had never felt so poor. A meaningful ending. The consequences of that day in the boardroom were not loud, but they were seismic. Henry, humbled and broken, withdrew his opposition to the kinetic dynamic steel. The acquisition went through, and the announcement of the Ramos Innovation Center was met with citywide acclaim. Gina, no longer a ghost of the past, became a celebrated figure, a philanthropist and visionary in her own right. Henry's name was never publicly connected to the failed land bid. His defeat was a private, deeply personal humiliation. He and Alexa parted ways, the illusion of their glamorous life shattered beyond repair. He was left in his penthouse, a king in a kingdom of one, forced to watch the woman he had discarded build a new world without him. He had sought adramatic confrontation, a way to reclaim his power. But he discovered that true power is not about control, but about creation. Gina and Williams didn't just win. They built something better. What happens when a man who has everything realizes he has nothing of value? This story is a glimpse into that brutal awakening.